Welcome back. Welcome in. It's Country Roads Confidential at earsports.com, Paramount Podcast. I am Mike Casazza here, joined by Chris Anderson. Chris, I stuck my head in a Christmas gift for 2 days, come back and problem solved. But also a lot of other, I shouldn't say problems, but like blanks that we thought were filled in maybe aren't. Now there's some blanks that we no longer have to worry about, new blanks that we have to fill in. Comes to coaching staff and roster. Man, the turnover inevitable, no doubt about that. But just some of the names on the roster out, the rush to get people in or for people to get in, and then meanwhile build a coaching staff that can win in the Big 12, while other programs are trying to build a coaching staff that can win in major conferences or group of five conferences. Again, I'd love the paycheck, but man, I would hate the job for stuff like this. This is really busy, really frenetic time. And on top of that, a lot of these schools were or are playing in bowl games or practicing for bowl games right now, or national championships even. And people want stuff fast. You're not going to get it fast enough. A head coach may want stuff fast. He may not be able to wait long enough. I don't know if they ever imagined or intended consequences like this, but man, what a dynamic it is for being a new coach taking over and transitioning into a new conference or a conference you um, have been in before, a school you've been at before. There's so many things going on, and you really have to stick the landing here. Otherwise, you're going to wobble and have to make three or four more times the work, it seems like, to get everything right.
Yeah, I mean it's a hassle trying to figure this all out, especially now, as you noted. I'm almost gonna put to the side the whole putting together an entire coaching staff part of this conversation for just a moment, because that is a whole other animal that is intertwined with what we're discussing here with the player ins and outs. And the hope, I think, was you make the hire. It wasn't quick. I mean, it was an average length coaching search, I would say, of Rich Rodriguez. You could get a jump on recruits. And then you have an early bowl game, then you can start hosting guys, all that stuff. But because of the coaching change and when the transfer portal opened, players had already entered and set up visits before a new coaching staff was even hired at West Virginia. So you're automatically, hey, you come in, hey, I just got hired at West Virginia. I want you to come visit. And they're like, well, I'm already booked here, 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 and here. I can squeeze you in, right here on this date. And that's about it. And that's tough. That's not easy. And then you got other guys who maybe don't have a bunch of visits lined up, but think about some of these guys like that are at Jacksonville State and a couple guys that got offers like Western Kentucky and different places. They entered the portal, well, it's still stuck with their teams to practice and play in the bowl game. That included a couple of the guys from Jacksonville State. I'm talking about like Cam Vaughn, like Fred Davis. Those are two guys that came up and officially visited this past weekend and both played in the bowl game for Jacksonville State. So you're also having to wait until their bowl games and their bowl practices are over. Now it's a little easier because those guys went to school where Rich Rodriguez just coached, but there's a lot of stuff going on. And I mean, this is it. And today we're recording this on December 23rd, Monday morning. No more visits. Like we're on a hard dead period, not even for transfers for a few days. But guys have already set them up to come back for another visit January 2nd. Like we're already building a list of guys that are coming in for January 2nd for West Virginia. So they might get a couple days rest here. They might not because you also still, as you noted, have to fill out a coaching staff. So you might take a break from transfer portal recruiting to be like, okay, now I can put together a coaching staff over these next few days, and then we can regroup for more transfer recruiting once we get to the new year.
The easy thing right now is to freak out about the pace and the lack of news or headlines. And I'm doing it, right? I like this to be done if we could. Is the smart thing, Chris, to rewind, 7 months ago? West Virginia hires a basketball coach, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, what is Darren DeVries doing here? He doesn't have his five assistant coaches. And plugged in the big one, got some people he knew who could help him run the business side of things, the recruiting, the player development on campus, all that. Goes out and gets the best he can do on the roster, which turns out to be pretty good, it looks like, 9-2 in non-conference play. And then goes back and adds the other pieces on the coaching staff. Is there a formula there? Do you think that football staffs are huge? it takes a long time to put one together. You're talking 20 coaches, Chris. It's 10 assistants, and then they all have assistants now too. I don't know how you can get it all done in one fell swoop or like 1 week. Is there a quote unquote DeVries model here that we could be witnessing?
Right. What do you mean, like circling back like they did on Tom Ostrom and like getting what Rick Trickett like 3 months from now? And like,
Yeah,
hey,
that's right. Yeah.
circle back around, change their mind on that one, or whoever changed their mind on that one, and figure this out. Um, I do think it is how you pointed out that for DeVries, get a couple key guys, then focus on recruiting, then circle back and fill out the rest of your staff. I think that's the key here. I think that's what football is trying to do. Um, another comment that was made, again, kudos to the guy who phrased it better than I did. Um, take the layups while you can, while you figure everything else out. And they were referencing the players, the transfer players. Same thing with coaches. Like if you have a couple guys from Jacksonville State, which we've already reported on that are coming up there, go ahead and be like, hey, you're in, good, good. We're not going to announce it yet, but you're in. Let's start working, moving forward. Now I got to focus on these other guys. You do the same thing with the players. You get a couple of the guys that you know and you know well, get them to recruit while you have time right now, or commit while you have time right now. Circle back for, I don't want to say bigger fish, but maybe guys that aren't connected to you personally later. And so, yeah, I think that's maybe what you do with basketball as well. Get a couple of the layups, get a couple of these guys, these position coaches that are coming from Jacksonville State, then try to land. It'd be nice if they could land like one or two big names that are not just coming from Jacksonville State with Rich to the program.
Yeah. So let's start with the coaching staff and the progress there. And let me transition like this. People will say, wait a second, Mike, you wrote this thing about how supposed to have an all-star coaching staff and a great roster. One, easier said than done, right? That's my welcome gift to Rich Rodriguez. Here are impossible expectations to live up to. Ta-da! But what that means, though, is I think people realize that this was an experiment sold in the idea that a lot of people would be behind it and that they could afford to pay the salary to the assistant coaches and the support staff. And we've seen those numbers, $7.5 million combined between those two sides of your football program. Not a major commitment increase, but still good money here. Um, then all of a sudden you're like, well, wait a minute. If you're going to go out and you're going to do this, are you paying all this money to Jacksonville State assistant coaches? And I don't mean that in a derisive way, just that you're not plucking Power Four assistant coaches or really highly successful Group of Five assistant coaches, even though that team has done some good things. And Rodriguez's offense speaks its own language, so it might make sense to get some of his guys here, especially early on in a culture building thing like this appears it's going to be. Well, who else are you going to get right now, Chris? Like the headlines right now are going to be West Virginia gets Jacksonville State's receivers coach and tight ends coach. And the clues online as to who followed him from the office side, directors of operation, talent acquisition, love that one. Like those people are on campus doing work now because they're available. And like you would want those people in office right now. So sure, there will be a population of people who say, this is not working. I was told there was going to be big money and big name assistant coaches. That still may yet happen, and maybe really soon, Chris. We'll see. But the seedlings are the people that know what's going on in Rodriguez's operation. And if you're going to see a couple of them come over, that's fine. And they're more likely to be here sooner than later, just based on the fact that one, their season's over, and two, they need a job. What are they going to wait on? They want to stick with Rich Rodriguez and do what he's doing and help him here. They're going to be here right now. So sure, if we're having this conversation the day before, I don't know, New Year's Eve. This is the day before Christmas Eve. That's only a week. I'm not even sure that's sufficient time, Chris, just because people travel and have plans. There's still bowl games going on. Around the same conversation 2 weeks from now. Well, he's only gotten Jacksonville State assistant coaches. He's only gotten coaches that he worked with at Louisiana Monroe or at West Virginia, 17 years ago. Sure, then it's a criticism. Right now, it looks the way it looks, and it means what you think it means depending on how you take in the information, what your expectations are. But it almost seems inevitable right now that you're going to have familiar people in your office because you got to get this thing running during a really important time.
You say this is week 0 of the
Uh,
assistant coaching search?
I think you were doing it. Knew it was coming in some capacity. I will grant him that. I think that's fair, but I also don't think it's a bad thing what's going on too. Like there are definitely people who are on the way who are working for West Virginia right now who don't have it in their Twitter bio or who haven't signed something. That's just how these things go. And they'll come out of the woodwork slowly, and you'll see the little context clues here and there. And Chris, you may talk to a recruiter or a transfer who says, "Yeah, I talked to so and so," and you're like, "Wait a second, he's an assistant coach at blank." That's not uncommon. Even when like assistant coaches change, you don't even have like a full scale coaching search. If you just have like you need a new cornerbacks coach, you'll talk to players who are in the portal or who are high school players who are saying, "Yeah, I talked to this guy." And you're like, "Why would you talk to him?" "Oh, he says he's going to be the cornerback coach at West Virginia. He called me the other day." Not unusual. You'll see stuff like that happen. Like there may only be, what do we have now, Chris? 3 out of the 10 spots officially. Is that right? And not even
Yeah,
officially.
let's do a quick recap.
All right.
Nothing's official. Nothing's been released. Nothing's been announced. Um, what we have heard, or not heard, but we've reported, or somebody on our network has reported. There are Ryan Garrett. There's Ryan Garrett, who was a wide receiver coach. Nicewander, the tight ends coach, who played tight end at Alabama, has been at Jacksonville State with Rich. I believe he was not following Rich around. I don't know. I can't remember if he was at Ole Miss or not, but that's because Rich does the inside receivers thing, right? Inside receivers / tight ends, just because of the offense.
Mhm.
So that might be his role. Garrett might be outside receivers, wide receivers, whatever you want to call it. But then Blaine Stewart has also been offered to stay on the job. And as we reported, the day that we reported that he was the only staffer that was offered a job, it was not clear if it would be as a tight ends coach. It's right there in the first paragraph. But if it's not tight ends coach and it's not receivers coach, which is where he assisted mostly when he was spent his time with the Steelers, where's it going to be? I guess we'll find out. But I think at this point, that's it, right? The 3 coaches that we can say have. I mean, there's rumors of others. There's things swirling. We're discussing it on our VIP board, but as far as things have taken the next step and these guys are actively around the program in Morgantown and helping recruit on behalf of WVU, these are the 3 guys that are known right now.
Yeah, so the way this assistant coach thing will work, you get your 10 full-time spots, and pretty typically it's 5 on offense, 5 on defense. That's why they added a 10th spot. Receivers, inside receivers could be 1. Receivers, fullback, tight end, inside receivers could be 1. So there's 2 there, and you're typically going to get quarterback, running back, and offensive line. Yeah, Blaine was the receivers coach at Pittsburgh, but he's pretty much a tight ends coach because they didn't have a tight ends coach. He was an assistant receivers coach. So he was with the receivers. He has experience there. More hands-on for sure with tight ends because he was also doing it in college. He played quarterback in high school, right? I don't think that anybody would be comfortable putting him in charge of quarterbacks. And we've been over the names here before that we think are in line to happen because Rod Smith is going to go to Marshall. There's a quarterback coach on
You
campus
can say
possibly
it. Go ahead
already.
and say it. We
Yeah, I
don't
mean,
have to keep it behind.
it's the name that we've heard for a while. Like it's been Rhett Rodriguez for probably what 7, 10 days now. That's been the strong possibility because the expectation was that Rod Smith was not going to make the trip. He was going to look for like a more organic offensive coordinator role, but also that Rich was going to do something different too. This would be different. I don't think Blaine would be your offensive line coach. There are, again, strong indications that this is going in another direction pretty quickly right now, and it's not going to be Rick Trickett because Rick Trickett is going to stay at Jacksonville State. His son Clint is not the offensive coordinator there, which means he won't be the quarterback's coach or offensive coordinator here. So you're really down to like 2 spots if Blaine Stewart is an offensive assistant. One's going to be quarterback's coach, one's going to be offensive line, one's going to be running back's coach. For 2 spots, does Blaine fit in there? Because he would be already in-house. I don't know where he'd fit unless he's an assistant position coach, which is not the same as what he's doing right now. And logically, it just doesn't make sense for one of the coaches to come from Jacksonville State, where they were a position coach, to be an assistant position coach here. That doesn't make sense. Could Blaine Stewart be your special teams coordinator? Just oversees all the special teams. I guess that's not been his bag so far in coaching, period. And then that takes you with one position away from somewhere else. So let's just say, again, that counts toward your 10, 5 on offense, 5 on defense. Where are you taking that 1 from? Unless he's going to be like, okay, he'll be half tight ends, half special teams. We already have a tight end coach. So my point is that this is going to be a really peculiar development to track because we don't know the what's. We know the who, don't know the what's. What are these guys going to do on offense? Because you get 5 spots. Can you cook the books a little bit? Could they use six? Fine, but like, are you devoting three positions to fullbacks, tight ends, inside receivers, outside receivers? That doesn't make sense. It would be new. It could be the new normal. I don't know, but that just doesn't make sense in my head right now.
Yeah, I
How are they
mean,
going to iron
because
that one
now
out?
that
We'll see.
yeah, now that you have unlimited on-field coaches, because the limit of 10 is simply for recruiting now. Like that's it. Because now you have unlimited on-field coaching. I mean, I know there's a limit come game day and all that stuff, but as far as like coaching at practice, you can really bump the numbers up there. But as you pointed out, do you want to allocate the resources to have three coaches coaching receivers and tight ends? I don't know if that's the case. And then the other thing I was thinking of, you mentioned there was special teams coordinator. Do you go back to the old school style of just having a guy that one person that focuses on nothing but special teams? I don't know how much experience Blaine has there, but you do that, you have your five guys on offense. So then your defense now becomes defensive line, linebackers, corners, safeties, and then you have a special teams coordinator. But oftentimes you see these coaches wanting to divvy up a couple of those spots on the defense, like inside linebackers, outside linebackers. You also have them, we saw it this past year, see it every once in a while now. A defensive coordinator that's just a defensive coordinator, doesn't take position coach. So I don't know. I'm interested to see how it all kind of pans out. Cause yeah, right now, and this makes sense. Right now, most of what has happened or what seems to be semi-official has happened on the offensive side of the ball at everything but, really coordinator spot. Yeah, I get it. Like running backs and offensive line still open, but I think that's because the guys you're looking at for coordinator probably coach those positions. Um, but it makes sense because Rich Rodriguez is an offensive coach. He has an offensive scheme. He is going to call the plays. So he knows who he wants to have around him. He doesn't have to worry about it. Meanwhile, on the other side of the ball, as we reported over the weekend, defensive position jobs are not being completely held off right now, but there has been a focus on finding a defensive coordinator before they start filling in the rest of that staff, which again makes sense. Rich Rodriguez handles the offense. He knows who he wants around him, feels comfortable filling out over there.
Yeah, one more thing on the Stewart note, because again, this could be the new normal, but you could have running back, quarterback, line, receivers, tight ends, offense, and you could have on defense, defensive line, linebackers, corners, safeties, hybrids. 10. You could also have 11, special teams coordinator. There's nothing that says you can't do that. I mean, and Blaine Stewart made $200,000 this year. You could probably find $200,000 for an 11th position coach. Now, the recruiting restrictions are strange there, but Chris, you also have to pick who recruits. So he could still have that. And then I can't speak for him in this. I don't know what he wants in his career. This might be an interesting thing. Like, what if it was Blaine Stewart, offensive assistant at large? Something like that. Or what if it was Blaine Stewart, special teams, you know, consigliere? I don't know. There are the way you can structure staffs now is very different. And I think sometimes I know I do, but I think sometimes people get caught up in the constructs of what has been, and this thing changes so much, and just the way you can put it together is so different every year now that the answer might be there. We just don't even see it. Like he could be here in some capacity. It's just not what we're used to seeing, and it still might be beneficial for him in the program too. So I don't think it's like a botched hire, but at all. I think it's really interesting to watch how they're going to make this work. It's part of the matrix now, putting it all together. This is like Rubik's cube in your hand, and you got a red here and a red here and a red on the other side, and you got to find a way to make that one come on over. And I was never very good at that, so be worth tracking. Stock
You
transfer
ready to?
portal.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you ready to talk players now?
Yeah. If you look at the 24/7 list of players who are in the portal, Chris, it looks like one of those preseason magazine, like top returning player lists. Like this should be where you begin when you start the conversation next year. Like you're like, oh, Hudson Clement, Tomas Remark, Trey Lathan, Darius Farmer, Johnny Williams, C.J. Donaldson, Aiden Garnes, I said Josiah Trotter, Jaheim Joseph. These are all players that you would be excited about having back next season because of their experience, their talent, their developmental process on campus, and they are all in the portal. Some of them already signed elsewhere. I would be surprised at this day and age if any of them come back. Never say never, but um, that was swift. There were a lot of players who went in pretty quickly after the bowl game, even before, and just a huge core of promise for next season instead in the portal.
And I'm gonna say not surprising, but still surprising. Like the actual names, like I we didn't know every single one that hey, I knew this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, and this guy were all leaving. But if you go back and listen to our podcast from right before Neil Brown got fired, or maybe it was the reaction pod to Neil Brown getting fired, um, I said, hey, there are 120 players on this roster if you include walk-ons. Because of the 105 now new cap, 23 departing seniors, and a coaching change, there is a possibility that only about 40 players, 30 to 40 players out of that 120 are back next season. It is going to be a massive overhaul. But we're trending in that direction. Scholarship players alone, down to 44 players that are coming back from this past season's team that are on scholarship that have eligibility remaining.
Wow.
And I don't think it's done. You obviously have the spring as well. There are going to be some guys that are going to be like, well, you know what? I'm going to give this new coaching staff a try. Let me see what goes on, see where I fit in their system, see what's going to happen, and then end up in the portal at the end of spring because it's that's just the way it is. We both warned like, hey, this is part of what's put into the calculus of making a coaching change. You knew that if you made a coaching change, it would exacerbate any transfer portal departures. It would make it greater. There would be more and more players leaving. And that's exactly what happened. So the names, a couple of them have certainly raised an eyebrow for me, but the quantity has not at all. By
No,
the
might be
way, did you see the last two that are not in the portal, but talked about this morning? Kind of got some semi-official confirmation on some discussion on the board over the weekend. I know you were out of pocket for this one, but Traylon Davis and Preston Fox retired, I guess is the word we're using here. They both had 1 year of eligibility. Both would have been redshirt seniors, so both have graduated. Both are done with school, and again, kind of got official-ish confirmation that both of them have decided not to return for next season. Neither are in the portal, so they're not going somewhere else, at least as of right now, but neither plan to come back to West Virginia right now.
Yeah. Fox is a sad thing. His body just kind of he had a rough year physically too. And Davis development that would catch people off guard, I think, but because you figure he might have been a call. I think when we were talking about players that Rodriguez might get excited about seeing in the bowl game, that was one. I was like, here's a guy who can block and play tight end. But you notice right away they started fishing for tight ends in the portal too. They lost a couple. I mean, Taylor graduated, Will Dixon's in the portal, and then they're pretty thin beyond that as far as like size and experience. So that doesn't help either too. Um, 30 days the portal's open for a coaching change, right? There are gonna be people who go home and are like, boy, I like the sunshine. Boy, I like warm temperatures. I miss my friends. Or I talked to my high school coach or I talked to my parents and they're going to change their mind. And I'm not sure how many will do it, but like I think that's natural. I think that in a spot like this happens. Colleagues that I talked to, coaching changes I've seen before, have not covered a coaching change in this environment. But even when the Brown to excuse me, Holgorsen to Brown happened, there were players who left after the change. There will be players who come back, who go home and could come back after the break and who aren't in the portal, and they just talked it over. They've been waiting and they've just been saying, "Let me get through the semester. Let me let me talk to the coaches. Let me see who they hire, or whatever." But like, they're not going to have answers to that, or the answers that they're going to have aren't going to be, redeeming, reinforcing. There will be players who, after the break here, after the Christmas break, they'll be like, "I'm going to go to the portal," because that is open for them until the 31st, correct? 30 days.
Yeah,
So they
and
have some time, and don't blame them for that either. Like they were so busy. They thought they were off for like an entire 10-day period. They got 3 days off because they had to get ready for a bowl game on December 17th. They come back in the middle of finals week. Finals week ended Friday of last week, Chris. Like that's a late semester here. So think of everything that's happened since Friday. That's some people who put off the decision for as long as they could and then acted, right? There are people who take a little bit longer. I'm not sure how many, but I wouldn't be surprised if a handful, small names, larger names, whatever, are in the portal sometime after Christmas and before the 31st because they have that 30-day break upon a coaching change.
yeah, and I wouldn't even say that's unique to coaching searches. I'm not saying that's what you were saying, but I you just sparked a memory in my mind here of CJ Donaldson 2 years ago. And I remember I was talking to multiple people, capital P people, and it was after he had gotten hurt his freshman year. And I can't remember if it was Thanksgiving or Christmas, and he was heading home, and
Yeah.
people back in Morgantown were like, "Oh crap, this is going to be the longest week of our life." Like we're all hands on deck to make sure. And they're calling his high school coach, being like, "Hey, just keep talking WVU for him, please, please, please," because there are people, and that's what there were people around him being like, "Hey, it's a big breakout year, nice and warm down here too. Think you might want to go somewhere else instead of West Virginia, instead of going back for spring semester, yada yada yada." And they were able to hold on to him. I mean, coincidentally enough, he's in the portal right now, but, but they held on to him for 3 years, which I think was more than maybe if you set the over under, that was more than people might have thought. Um, but this is something you always have to worry about. And the kids get a bad rap for some of this. The players, I keep calling them kids. Most of them are adults now. But it's a lot of times it's the people around the players that are the ones doing the fishing, the fishing around for the extra money, the extra this, the extra that. So I think I reported, not reported something, but mentioned something on the board the other day about a player, and our VIPs can go read it. And I followed up on it, that entered the portal from West Virginia. And I said, "Hey, this is a guy that has had something in place, if you will, money wise, from before the season finished." And that was because people around him back home in Florida were touching base with other schools, being like, "Hey, what can you pay him if he comes here? What can you do in here?" So there's always something like that happening. Always, always, always. Didn't mean to go on a tangent there. It just sparked a memory in my mind.
You're freaking out that digital update behind you, by the way. It keeps
Oh,
uploading, and I'm very worried about it. Yeah, like Chris said, something has stimulated the clock on the wall behind him, and all of a sudden it's updating. So let's wrap this up here quickly. Some number of players on campus this weekend. Commitment from one, promising
two,
signs from another.
two,
So that's
two.
right, two commitments, yeah, and then promising signs from some other visitors too. Familiar familiar school, at least on one of them. But again, it makes some sense because they're available too. But all conference caliber player. Chris, this this sounds like last year and the year before, but also don't freak out about that because like you're gonna have to get a certain caliber player just to start with. Take your layups, and if an all conference player from the Sun Belt wants to come and play quarterback for you, and you can get that done, do it. You're gonna need a lot of people, like a lot of people. And if that guy is your starting cornerback, that's all right. If he's your fourth cornerback after the portal, that's okay too. Like I just this is such a new and different experience for people who have followed West Virginia football closely, but maybe have had blinders on that they don't realize how different this is going to be than a conventional transfer portal year slash season.
Yeah. Commitment from Eastern Michigan wide receiver Orrin Singleton and South Alabama cornerback Jordan Scruggs. Also on campus, some other guys. Won't mention all of them, but cornerback Fred Davis from Jacksonville State and wide receiver Cam Vaughn from Jacksonville State. Those are two
Big one
guys I
there.
would keep a very close eye on. Yeah, Vaughn, true freshman, I believe, and had a very good year. Looked great in the bowl game. Was it 10 catches for 170 yards in the bowl game? Um, yeah, might be explosive, might be pretty good. Yeah, no, excuse me, 10 catches for 184 yards and a touchdown in the bowl game. The 75 was the 75-yard touchdown he
Yeah.
caught and sprinted past the entire secondary to score. Um, Two very good players in campus from Jacksonville State. Have to like the connections there and the chances for West Virginia. We'll see. We had some others, a big offensive lineman that seemed to be enjoying himself. Um, no confirmation that tight end Carson Kent ever made it to campus, but as we were doing this podcast, he committed to Oklahoma officially. My understanding was I think he committed to Oklahoma and never made it to Morgantown, but that was another one again, as you said, one of the early, hey, we need some more tight ends offers. So more updates to come because yeah, several other players have told me already we're going to be in Morgantown January 2nd. That's the next one because that period starts. They're not going to do any visits over New Year's Day, New Year's Eve. So January 2nd is going to be another big day for West Virginia.
Home basketball weekend too, right? So
Oh, is it? Yeah, I mean,
that'll help. Yeah.
that's usually the desire, at least when they set up some of these visit weekends and junior days and such.
I'll have the binoculars out, peeking into the recruit section there.
Go stalk them and take pictures and send it to me. Like, this guy was just talking to Rich Rodriguez. Who is it?
Perhaps we follow someone in the restroom and who is this guy? We'll see. Um, that's actually a story. That wasn't just an idea of mine. That was something that maybe I should stop right now too.
Yeah, don't tell that story.
Yeah,
Especially not
why would
on
I tell
camera.
that story?
Don't tell that story on camera.
No, it was an awkward moment. All right, so yeah, plenty happening. Basketball as well. Chris, matched the season win total from last year.
Oh yeah.
I don't think anybody cares, but like, yeah, and like certainly more. I mean, more questions than answers right now about this team. For even though they are 9-2 and have looked just better than their opponents for the past probably 2 weeks. I feel like they never really got to test themselves after that Gonzaga, Louisville, Arizona stretch, but that's not bad either. They went back and workshopped some stuff, but they've been in the workshop for a while. And boy, the first test. Welcome to the Big 12, Darren. You're on.
It's a
You're
big
five
one.
on eight in Norman on not Norman in Lawrence on New Year's Eve, so that'll be fun. Yeah, lots coming up. Not just football, not just staffing. We'll do some basketball, look at some other things, and then some stuff to carry through the holidays here. Chris, any promises you want to make about what to expect and when? Maybe more importantly.
Well, the only thing I can promise is you and I are going to record another podcast in a few minutes, and we'll put it up right after Christmas, so you guys can go listen to that in a few days. Other than that, I got no guarantees because
Or should you?
holidays and this news cycle. Who knows?
Sounds good. Until then, I'm Mike Casazza.
And I'm Chris Anderson.
We will talk to you then.